some of the people that are here. It's a really exciting area. I've been working in publishing for about 20 years, mostly in innovation product development roles, and I must say it's the first time I really see a technology that really has a promise to change science and scholarly communication for the good. So I hope you'll agree with me after tonight. Yeah, so let's maybe start with some of the challenges that we have in scholarly communication, because when we think about change, we should have a reason to change. And there are several challenges that we're facing today in research. E-reproducibility is a big one, something that comes up frequently in the news. Research simply can't be reproduced. Research that is published in journals is very difficult to reproduce, which should be a cornerstone of scientific communication. So it's quite worrying. And there's also the publication bias, that a lot of research that has been done is not published because there is a tendency to publish the positive results and report on those. So there's a lack of data. There's data missing to do proper science. The peer review crisis is, of course, something that comes up frequently. And I would say there are two aspects to the peer review crisis. The one has to do with transparency. We simply often do not know who the reviewers were and what has been done with the review reports, for example. And there's also a big issue about recognition. So review is a very important research activity, but there's simply no way now to properly track that and to recognize researchers for the important work that they do in review. The third is metrics. I like very much what Stephen says there. It's that the current system of metrics is based on an outdated or a print publication process. So we basically measure what we could measure in the old days, which is number of publications and citations. But there are so many more valuable things that scientists do. Of course, review being one, but there's several more that we simply do not measure. We do not form them into metrics, because we simply did not have the way to properly store all the activities of researchers. And fourth is, the last but not least, of course, the commercial crisis. We have the subscription model, which comes with its own set of problems, high prices and lack of accessibility. It's not open. Simply not all researchers have access to all content that is available. And then we have open access, which was, of course, was very promising, is still very promising, but we all have to admit that it's only about 20% of articles that are open access, and it introduced its own set of problems, for example, predatory problems. So quite some challenges that we are facing in research today. So how could blockchain help with these challenges? There are many, many ideas, and I'm happy that some of the specialists are here tonight to answer the difficult questions if they come up. But a way to look at it, and what you can see in the various people and initiatives we highlight in the report, is that we have to look at blockchain as a very special database. Basically, it's a central, decentralized database. So there's no single owner, and everybody shares the same copy of that database, but it's still trustworthy. And that's a very important aspect and can have a big impact on the way research is done. It's also an effective way to disseminate content peer-to-peer without an intermediary, another important element. So just not to summarize all the findings and all the ideas, because there's several, and actually the last couple of weeks we had seen some more initiatives in this field, but maybe to highlight 3 ways in which the blockchain could overcome some of the challenge that we are facing today. There is a lack of integrated systems and databases. There are just a lot of databases that people use in science. This is just an example of a workflow of an average article. You write your Word document, then you send it to editorial manager. Maybe you store some of the data or the manuscript or Picture. It goes into the publishing system, and then it's published. Some information about the review might end up at Publons, and then it goes into Scopus and citation databases like Web of Science and Scopus. So it's all separate databases, which is a challenge. So what blockchain could do here is that it would be one database that stores all this activity, which is already an incredible change and improvement from the current systems. Again, not working with all different systems, but we just have one database that is decentralized, which stores everything, all the important interactions in science. The second concrete example on how blockchain could help research and overcome the challenges is thinking about the current dissemination models. So let's say I write a manuscript, I send it to a publisher, I hand over my copyright, and a researcher will download the paper hosted on the publisher, and the subscription is paid by the university or institution. It's also quite a complex system. And a very interesting aspect of blockchain, I think, is that it allows the content dissemination to be more simple, basically built on micropayments. So every time I download a paper, I have a micropayment for that. So it's different than subscriptions, it's different than open access, and it could be a fair and a sustainable business model underlying the dissemination of content. The third thing is talking about metrics and recognition. Again, at the moment, the number of data points we have about researchers and the activities is too limited. Again, if we think about having this one shared database that's storing much more information about what researchers do, including, for example, peer review. Once we have that database, of course, it's much easier to build different metrics and more comprehensive metrics, and being a better reflection of the scientific value of the activities of researchers. And again, so these are just three quite simple, but I think already quite fundamental changes that could make scholarly communication better than it is today. So is it, as one of the chapters in the research, is it a hype or a game changer? And that's a question nobody, I think, in this room can answer. If you do, please let me know. But it's important to know that we are in the top of the hype cycle. Interesting, by the way, that we are now somewhere there. So it's indeed hyped, and it's also the reactions we get. Interesting, by the way, that blockchain 2 years ago didn't appear at all in this graph. So it's going really, really fast. So yes, there is a lot of hype, and there is a lot of news, and a lot of things that you can question whether it will work. I think tonight we might have a milestone in terms of pricing. Yes, indeed.
It's all downhill.
It's all downhill. But we do think that this is actually a very good moment to start a conversation and to talk about blockchain and to talk as a community about what it could do and what direction it could move into. We can't predict the future, but this is the right time to talk about what it could mean for our industry. Because yes, there is a hype, but yes, there are also fantastic ideas, and we hear some of those ideas tonight. They're really good initiatives. And things are actually going so faster than the print publication workflow, because after we delivered a copy of the research, we had some very interesting announcements. Pluto, for example, is a very ambitious decentralized scholarly communication platform based on blockchain, which basically wants to do everything that has been written in the report. There is Conscience, or Conscience, I guess it's Conscience, which looks quite, again, not much known about it, but it's a big player that is behind it, so it could be quite powerful. And we have Science Route, and all these initiatives, again, announced more or less in the last couple of weeks, all point in the direction and all talk about the things that are highlighted in the report as possible applications for blockchain. So very exciting time to be in, and very looking forward to the discussion, and I think indeed the right time to talk about the potential that this can have for us. Conscience, yeah.
Is it not pro-science?
We do not much more than what is there and who is behind it, but yeah. Who knows? Pronunciation is sensitive. Okay, thank you very much. So I guess, yep.
This was my part.
Yeah.
Is there any questions for Joris at this point?
Anybody have any questions? Hands up. Yeah, at the back there. I don't think we have mics. We do have mics.
I don't have any questions. I just wonder, is there Slack available later for us to download?
Are your slides available? Can you make them available? We'll make them available and we'll share them on the digital science channels and everything. Perfect. Okay, and so next up, if I am just Just Googling my stuff right. Sorry, let's grab this 2 seconds. Next is Eefke, is it? Okay, perfect. Whose laptop is this?
So, next slide.
Soenke. Okay, sorry. Soenke, over to you. I promise this will get better as the night evolves.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here. It's a pleasure for me. The only thing that's messed up in my presentation is the title slide. So we go first. Oh, sorry. And this button?
I've got to rearrange the keys, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So just
Okay.
press
Yeah,
down.
so I start with a disclaimer, okay? So a disclaimer, be careful if you talk about blockchain, you run into a lot of abstractions, people talk about trust, trusted third parties, internet services, databases, monetary value, new value propositions, all these things, okay? And then it's a hype. There was I mean, you know, blockchain for music industry, for movies, for real estate, for, of course, banking will all be replaced by Bitcoin, and blockchain for, there was a serious MIT press title on Thanksgiving, titling, it's not a Thanksgiving joke, blockchain for turkeys makes sense. Yeah? Seriously, seriously. Okay, so I start with the most important disclaimer here. Blockchain can't do anything that a perfectly trusted third party couldn't be doing, right? So and since trusted third parties can do a lot, people say that blockchain can do a lot, right? Actually, blockchain has some serious issues in terms of scalability in comparison to trusted third parties. We can talk about these things in detail, but like, okay, well, a perfectly trusted third party, if you think about science, like the advancement of humanity and our future, then, and we trust it on somebody, on a trusted third party, it's like asking for the, oh shoot, again, okay, yeah. It's like asking for the Hauptschulleviat, what is it again?
Just down, just
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I just like, okay. So you could pronounce it correctly for the Hauptschulleviathan, okay? So if you would have a perfectly benevolent king, a trusted king, we wouldn't need democracy, right? But since we don't have it, we have democracy, right? Okay, so this is a kind of another abstraction I delivered to you right now, okay? So blockchain gives us a new way of distributing trust and seeing these things, looking at them, okay? And blockchain is a new way to look at databases. Like today, we know that we interact with a database, and database is basically an internet service here. Like Facebook is, if you look at your Facebook feed, it's a query of a database, right? So blockchain is a database, basically. Bitcoin is a big database, right? And databases today are organized that we have like to trust one central entity that runs a service that can basically do anything what they want to do with it, right? And it's so normal for us to trust the banks that they could basically manipulate our accounts, right? But they don't do it, right? That's why they are banks, right? Normally, they have a reputation behind it. In blockchain world, this changes. So we still have computers where a service is running on, but we have like distributed other computers that basically provide cryptographic powers to maintain this service, and so that you can't manipulate it in a non-determined way, right? And Bitcoin is the best example. You can't change a Bitcoin account address without providing a proof that you have the private key to this address. And everybody can see this, look this up, that it's like written in the blockchain code, in the Bitcoin code. And so you could like you can even put $100 billion of value into it. And people trust it so far because you can see it, right? Well, blockchain is a chain of blocks, right? Some blockchain talks start with it, but it's basically, it's true. Blockchain is a chain of blocks, but it became more than just this. It's like the term internet. The term internet started like was the interface between networks, way of networks to interact with each other. But this term internet became much more. If an alien from outer space would come today and we would explain him what the internet is, we wouldn't say it's a TCP IP at port whatever kind of standards, right? It's like what we are doing with our cell phone every day. It changed our society and everything. And how we interact, how we ride a cab. So blockchain was this like boring database, but now it became much more. It's the next evolution step in the internet, how we interact basically with the internet. Oh, there are more slides messed up, but okay. I already had it. Blockchain is a chain of blocks. It's a new way to look at databases, to organize database in the way that they are distributed, decentralized, and immutable. Yeah? So you can't change the database. A database that you can't change is kind of boring, right? It's like a constant. It's not useful. So in reality, that means that it's append only. It's like a piece of paper. You can only add something. You will still see the scratches if you deleted something in the past, right? So blockchain basically does this, the immutability of paper that our society is based on. You sign a contract. It applies this to computer space, to computer memory, if certain conditions are full. And it's a way of organizing a service to be transparent and provable to the outside, so that you don't have to trust Springer not to manipulate the likes on an article or the download. Springer actually could prove it to you, right? Okay. And it's a cultural change, well, how we manage data and identities. So you retrain, you keep control over your identity if you interact with a blockchain database in form of your wallet, your private key. If we log into Facebook, we log in, establish a secure connection, and then we trust Facebook to do things like how we want it to do it, how it's supposed to do it, right? In blockchain world, every changes to this database are signed with our private key that is stored in our wallet, and we have full control over it, okay? So we retrain control over our identity basically in blockchain world, right? So this is a new thing. And it's a new way to look at computer security. Today we build our database behind a walled system, a walled garden, firewalls protected. Blockchain world is by intrinsic mechanisms in the protocol, it's so secure that it basically can run in the complete open. And you can't mess with it. It's like Bitcoin. Everybody can download Bitcoin and install it. You couldn't do this with your database, right? Everybody would screw around with SQL syntax and like mess it up, right? So, and another field that it's like on top of this immutability of addresses to come new things like a new economy, the crypto economy, okay? So, well, this is a general blockchain introduction, and now what's in for science here. And Joris already said a lot of things, and we already talked, and we said there's a lot of overlap. So basically, you can have all parts of the research cycle that are digitized today. In theory, you could like put into a blockchain, right? In theory. The only thing that you can't put into blockchain is an experiment itself, right? If you would be able to do this, you would win a few Nobel Prizes, I'm pretty sure, right? So blockchain can't learn anything about real world without having an interface to it, right? That's a fundamental problem. But everything else, like acquisition, processing, analyzing, and then publication, like Joris said this, already talked about this, can be done on the blockchain, and then, of course, evaluation, and then funding distribution methods, right? I will go rather quickly over it. This is the idea of like basically connecting the internet of research things with a blockchain, so you publish your results directly to a blockchainified database, okay? And this is a new way of then looking at blockchainified data science is what we have today is basically, or what we used to have is like this thing, so you trust the Leviathan, the trusted third party, which is the researcher, right? He will never ever change anything in an Excel sheet, even if it's 0.0.6, the p-value, and there might be, oh, well, this one mouse was sick, had a cold, okay, so I drop it, it's 0.05 now, great. This will never happen. Well, this is the research world we used to have, and then there only the final publications were faced, right? And then we had like this idea of pre-registering studies, okay, so you make it like this. This was open to scientific self-correction, open data science, where you publish your final data results. But in blockchainified science, you basically publish all your data to the blockchain database. It doesn't need to be necessarily open at this point. You can just store the data trail of your acquired research data, and then at some point you decide, here, this is my data, and I can prove by this data trail that I never forged it, right? And I never dropped this mouse, or if I want to drop it, I have to explain it, right? That it really had the code, okay? So the same thing can be done basically with analysis. So we can call it smart evidence instead of smart contracts. We can have a smart evidence. We can define our study results or the conclusion when we want to draw this conclusion after this threshold. And as soon as this threshold is reached, an automatic sign goes up, accept this hypothesis. This would be a way to have like basically our post-processing immutable, okay? Now there's this idea of the research data, and at the moment we have like the idea that we trust the third party that is analyzing the research data, but what do we do if we are really concerned about patient anonymity, right? We need to trust this third party to not abuse his trust. In the context, in the realm of blockchain world, there are concepts coming up like blockchain secured multi-party computation, zero knowledge proof. It's basically that you can draw conclusions from the data without actually having the data available. It sounds weird, it is weird, and it's not working completely independent in distributed systems right now, but it's a very interesting topic, especially if you talk about genome, because there's no anonymization of genome, because it's like a fingerprint, right? So what if we have a smart contract that you review, and the commission reviews it, and the smart contract only looks at certain gene positions, and then there's like this conclusion, okay? Good. And then we have one other end. Just like it's the second last slide. Blockchain allows us to have store value, and this allows us to have new funding mechanisms, and very easily to implement new funding mechanisms, how to distribute research money, and it's like the obligation of the government that it has to the taxpayer to have a transparent way of research money distribution. Blockchain would be a very beautiful way of still having new ways of distributing research money, and still have them transparent, right? I mean, we can't distribute our money to the retweets or the likes on ResearchGate or on Springer or the downloads because we know that they can easily change it. In blockchain, if they would run a blockchain database, they couldn't change it arbitrarily, right? So the government could say, okay, I give the downloads 10,000 euro. Okay, and then we have like this weird thing of ICOs. It's like basically going public with a weird token on the blockchain and collecting 300 million in 2 hours and then not claiming the money and it all drops. It's in the press, but we have the first ICO in science. It really happened. They collected 800,000 worth of Ether tokens. ICOs is this crowdfunding things where basically buy into a project with some Bitcoin or Ether, and you can sell it right away. Not like crowdfunding, you have to like wait for a T-shirt to arrive. You can sell it and profit from it if the project is good. So it's like exploding, and basically it's the time now to structure this, right? We have a new funding mechanism coming up in science, and why not structure it to our benefit right now? So we have them to store the data on blockchain, make open science things, not use excessive marketing and all these things, okay? Okay, so, and then we are talking about publications. So there's a very nice idea that is actually not mine. Why don't we have anonymous publications? The problem with scientists is that they are stuck in their science culture system, right? So they have like these people they see there at this board meeting and here and there, and well, I had this idea in the bus tube, but it's too weird, I can't share it openly. I would share it on a blog platform somewhere in the internet, but I will never get any impact factor or money from it, right? So why should I share it, right? So imagine you can anonymously share this publication, right? And you can like sign it with a cryptographic key, and the government gives like 50 million every year for the best anonymous publication. So maybe this is a way to like have science advance faster, because Max Planck once said, like science advances a funeral at a time. the old scientists die out, but if they can experiment with new standpoints and maybe get money for it, that would be a good way to maybe accelerate science. I don't know, it would be worth a try. Blockchain would allow to do this without a trusted third party. And actually there is somebody who came up with this on Zenodo. It was a publication, and it wasn't me. Seriously, I wrote to him, and if we would have a blockchain for science now, I could prove to you that it wasn't me, but we don't have it yet, so you have to trust me, right? Okay, so... No, okay, thank you very much for your attention, and we have like this living document where we collect all the ideas, it was already mentioned, and we have like this meetings, the hackathon on this weekend. Thank you very much for hosting it and supporting us. We are really excited about this, and maybe we actually get some coding done and work on prototypes, and then we have like more events in Berlin and Vienna coming up. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Soenke, for giving me a heads up you were going to finish early as well, so I'm a bit more prepared this time. And also, the order wasn't confirmed. If we'd have had a smart contract that was immutable, we would know Eefke was supposed to be next, and I wouldn't have messed that up for everybody. Does anybody have any questions for Soenke at this point? I have a few, but I'm asking him lots at the end. Yeah, I'm going to run to you.
Yeah. So that's a very, very interesting, very exciting topic, and especially this blockchain-defined multi-party.
Yeah, just to, so can you elaborate on the zero proofs?
Yeah, knowledge proof is exciting. I'm not a developer. I know that it's there. I know what it is. For the blockchain, how you would do it? This zero knowledge proof doesn't need blockchain. That's why I said, like in the realm of cryptography, there's also this because blockchain is all cryptography associated. There people talk about it as well. Blockchain secured multi-party computation is another thing. That is a field for blockchain too. Okay.
He's just asking for examples. So you have examples about the genome.
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't want to.
This was imagine. It's not there yet. There's this.
Somebody doesn't want to reveal their genome.
Yeah. Yeah, or analysis, you can do certain conclusion, you can draw conclusions from it. I have this genome, I don't have this gene, I have this gene, but you are not leaking your data to anybody. Yeah, so today you need to trust somebody to like analyze it for you and not look at the other things. Okay? Yeah.
Any other questions for Soenke at this point? Okay, thank you very much once more, Soenke. And so, I think we've got a broad audience here, some academics, some blockchain enthusiasts, and the last two talks have been very good at setting the scene and planting ideas in people's heads, as we've seen already. Next up, we have Eefke Smit, who is I know Eefke from the open data space, and more primarily, she works for the STM organization with regards to their standards side of things. So, take it away, Eefke.
Thank you, Mark. I have no slides. I just have a few views for you. And I want to start by saying that I do a lot of on innovation in STM and scholarly publishing, and I've been following blockchain for 2 years, and I still can't really get my head around it. There's a lot of magic there, and I was wondering, when you've been listening to Soenke, who's a real expert in this field, how many of you could now explain to your neighbor what blockchain is? Hands, I want to say, oh, well, very good. Well, that's still quite a bit more than I was expecting. We've been covering at STM events, we've had blockchain speakers really for 2 years now, and each time I myself have the feeling I'm still confused, but at a higher level. And that's the way it goes from time to time. But I've also been, and I'm still very intrigued by blockchain, and especially by a few aspects of it. First of all, it is a peer-to-peer, or it creates a peer-to-peer network of trust. And it provides a secure and encrypted open registry. And then if you look at the really strong points of blockchain, I tend to cluster them in two big blocks. Sorry, blocks is maybe not the right word to use here, but in two main clusters. One is everything that has to do with authentication, registration, provenance, identity. So sort of making that very secure. What is something and where does it come from? And then at the other side, everything that has to do with transactions, time stamping, smart contracts, providing the evidence that something has happened. And those two elements come together in blockchains in a very secure way. And what I find most intriguing is if you mirror that to what scholarly communication is trying to achieve, it is exactly the same thing. If you look at everything that has been written, for example, about the function of the scientific journal, which had its birthday of 350 years last year, so 350 years to come to a set of common conduct, agreement on how researchers should do this. Well, we always say that the scientific journal has four main functions. That is registration, dissemination, certification, and secure archiving. Well, it's exactly these 4 points that blockchains can put in place in a very secure way without a central authority and unmanipulatable, etc., etc. So, in short, if we would start from a clean slate, we would probably organize all our scholarly communication via a blockchain, probably. But would we do that now? So I find in the report that's on the table here, the most intriguing question is it indeed a hype? Is it indeed a game changer? And what could turn it from the current hype into a real game changer? If that would happen, you probably need either of two things. One is a promise for something that is much better than we have now, or the desperation about the current system has to come to sort of a critical cooking point where people really want to change it. So the question is do we get a much better promise or do we get a solution to a broken system? Well, to start with that last question, I don't think the system is broken. It has some imperfections, yes. And Joris listed them very nicely. But I don't call it a broken system. I call it, we have some imperfections that need some repair. So could blockchain do that? Yes, I think it could. You know, in the sphere of open peer review, in the sphere of setting up rewards for peer reviewers, you could do all of that in a blockchain. And will that completely overhaul our system? No, I don't think it will completely overhaul it. And you also need actors who want to adopt blockchain for that. And in that sense, I think blockchain is very much an infrastructure technology. So what my personal expectation is that this is one of these technologies that will start to be used by current players to fix certain things. And what always happens with infrastructure technology is in the end, you don't see it. So here in this room, you know, we have high expectations of where will blockchain go. Well, maybe it has a big future, but maybe a few years from now, we won't even notice. You know, all the people who are hyped about Bitcoin now, how many of them really know that what blockchains really do in the background? So that is one thing. I think the big players, as usual, will be helped by clever startups who start building these applications. At the same time, if you follow the literature, you suddenly see in the last few months, and then I don't mean the expert literature, but more sort of the literature that is understandable for people at my level, you suddenly start to see that there's still some technology flaws to be solved about computer power, about metadata capacity, which is not all in place, and that you need sort of what I tend to call a Ponzi system of computers and more computers who check the other computers, and you know, where's the end to that? So I'm not so sure how fast it will go, but I do think it will make its entries here and there. This is very much my personal perspective, and maybe I'll be completely wrong after a while. But I have a few considerations, you know, a few questions for myself that I haven't solved yet. One is the more people say that a blockchain cannot be hacked, the more suspicious I get, because you know, there always seems to be some kind of a man-machine rat race, that the cleverer the machines get, then there's always also an even more clever solution of somebody who starts gaming the system or who undermines the machine. So, you know, I'm a techno-optimist, so I'd love to believe that a blockchain cannot be hacked, but can we really be sure about that before we start to implement it everywhere? Another element of consideration that's on my list is switching costs. You know, people have invested so much into a current system. You know, the promise of something new really must be better before people start to migrate their assets massively from a current system into blockchains. So I have some questions there. Somebody mentioned scalability. Somebody else also mentioned inertia. You know, you always have a lot of inertia in a system. So, but nevertheless, I do see a lot of promises. And especially in scholarly communication, I already mentioned a few. You know, open peer review, I think there's really something there. Peer review rewards. Think, you know, if people like to think of cryptocurrencies and new ICOs, well, maybe we can have our own currency among researchers where you gain points if you do your peer review, and then those points can be exchanged maybe for research funding or for paying your APCs or whatever. Rights management is a very obvious one, but also identity management, you know, having researcher profiles in blockchains seems to me a very obvious application. But perhaps the grant that has just been launched brings many more ideas in this aspect, and yeah, I'm a believer, but I also still want to see it come true. So that's in short my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Eefke. I think that was really useful to have within the context of the conversation so far. As I said, you know, it's good to have a balance of both sides of the story. I like that you're a techno-optimist, but also, I'm guessing, a techno-realist. And it's really good for, as somebody who works a lot in the open data space and goes to a lot of conferences where we all just pat each other on the back and say, yeah, open data's going to work, man, there's no problems there. It's really good to have somebody ask the questions that there may be an answer for, and the people in this room probably have the answer for, but I think it'd really be good to just open that discussion up. So as I say, we've got one more talk and then we will be having a discussion about these things, so get your questions lined up because we would like audience participation. Does anyone have a question for Eefke at this moment?
Nope,
okay, thank you, Eefke. And so last up we have Eveline, and this is a good jump as well because we've nicely jumped from side to side here. And so catalysis, which Eveline's going to be talking about, is an existing DApp, I'm guessing? Or it's the existing technology that is working on the blockchain and rewards publishers, not necessarily focused on the academic space, but it's publishing in general. So take it away.
Just that over there.
Yeah, down. Yeah, so it was Sankar. Hi everyone, thank you for having me here. Thank you for the invitation, Digital Science. So I am a co-founder of Catalysis, a startup company which I founded roughly 1.5 years ago together with my... Oh, I will stand here. I'm sorry.
It's just a recording, so.
Together with my business partner, I'm used to walk around. Together with my business partner, Alex Tranqui. And we are redefining the value of online content. And as you rightfully said, we are not specifically only looking in the science publishing industry, but more general to the whole publishing, to the publishing industry as a whole. Oh, sorry, you just said it, and then I'm doing it wrong. Oops. So I'm a doer, not a thinker. No. Oh, just. Down. Yeah. So, what we saw with Catalysis, what we were looking at was the publishing industry as a whole, and publishers are really struggling in order to remain profitable online. And when your valuable content is spread over the internet, you lose all your rights there. Everybody can use it, share it, and you don't get any revenue, any money from that. So what's happening in the publishing industry is that publishers are locking their valuable content up behind paywalls. And that's a shame, because the internet makes exponential growth possible. But yeah, you lose ownership and you need to eat in the end of the day. The other interesting aspect what we saw was that the value of online content is offline decided, whereas if your content is out there and it's being reused and reread over and over, you as a publisher also want to gain from that. So we saw these problems of internet scalability not really captured very well. Micropayments are really expensive due to the high fees, and it's really not possible to reuse content in an easy manner. So we have developed a digital ownership and micropayment solution based on smart contract blockchain technology for that, and I will explain it a bit later. What? Oh, God. I'm so sorry. It's not logic. So technology, you have to make it very logical, and I'll explain how we do that. So what we see as startups looking in blockchain technology and publishing, we saw these various initiatives. Monetization, of course, makes sense, peer-to-peer transaction of value. And also fact-checking, as Soenke rightfully said, a blockchain in itself isn't doing the work. We as humans need to do the work. So, but what a blockchain can do is you can backtrack all the way right back to the original creator, and we can then flag down where this content, where the journey of this content has been. So when the source is not credible, then we know where the content has been spread and where the errors might be in the process. Review quality and reputation as well. The blockchain in itself cannot say this article is better or it's super bad. What we see initiatives like Steemit, what they do is the crowd upvoting content, and based upon that, then it's perceived as high quality content. But of course, if Kim Kardashian launches a new lipstick and people upvote it, is that quality content? You could debate on it. Or storing your reputation on the blockchain. Of course, that needs to come with certain cost, because you can upload articles, you control the system, but if you have to pay with your reputation, then you could do some very interesting things with that. Privacy is also a topic which other startups are really focusing upon, but we think it's very delicate to really state that you could have it safe. As Eefke said, today we claim the blockchain is not hackable, but what happens in 5 to 10, 20 years' time? And maybe 90% of the research, it doesn't matter whether the source is being revealed, but maybe for this small percentage, it may come at a very high cost. And especially in the journalistic space, if you want to do source protection, it's very, very, very difficult. You have to really think up front how you want to build this system. Rights management, of course, and reusability of content, and that's what we're looking at my startup company. So we, when you upload the content, a direct link is being made to the rightful holder, and based upon that, we can do some very interesting things with the technology. Down. But the main thing, and the main challenge, what we believe at Catalysis, is that we as an industry really need to think about how we're going to implement the technology. Because the technology is there, it will evolve, it will get better, scalability issues will be resolved by some brilliant people. but we really need to think about how we can implement this technology. And for us as catalysts, we don't believe we can overhaul the whole system. We are really looking at specific problems. Really, we make it really tiny, little digital rights management micropayments, and we want to be the best in that specific area and grow this ecosystem from there on. So our first implementation is this. And this is being used by Reporters Online, a platform of freelance journalists in the Netherlands. And what we've looked at is how the journalists today upload their content to their websites. And they use WordPress. So what we've done, we've built a WordPress plugin. Really simple, really easy, elegant, and no change of processes. And we think that's the way to go forward, and that's the way to really embrace the potential possibilities of blockchain technology. Well, here it's the micropayment component is really important, but you can think of in science, for instance, reputation is way more important than micropayments. So you could shift this way of thought to building up your reputation. So that's what we do.
Okay, thank you very much, Eveline. At this point, we're going to have a chat on stage, so can I invite all of the speakers up on stage? In the meantime, does anyone have any direct questions about catalysis or anything that Eveline was just talking about just now? As I said, I'm saving mine because I have a lot of questions for this section. Okay, and as I said, this is an interactive conversation. It's really interesting to see. We've probably got a lot of people who are from the academic space with blockchain as a hobby, or from the blockchain space with academia as a hobby. Me, myself, my interest in this space came about, so I run Figshare, which is one of the digital science portfolio, and I was checking my emails today. I emailed a guy called Juan Bennett about, he runs something called IPFS, which is the grand titled Interplanetary File System. And so and it's done really, really well since I last spoke to him. But it's all about distributed storage. And so I was thinking, is there a way we can back up all of the data on Figshare on distributed storage? So I'm definitely from the academic side with a blockchain interest. And he was an academic, as many people working in blockchain are, with an academic interest. So I have a few questions for everybody involved here today. I think it's really interesting to get both sides of the story. I think an obvious starting point that was alluded to by a few of the folk today, I don't know if we could get another microphone, Cameron? Oh, okay, you're roving. Okay, I'll pass this down. Is just about, you know, not every, you see a lot in the news, these ICOs, initial coin offerings, raising hundreds of millions, and not every industry needs a coin. That's always the question that gets asked. But it was also part of my thoughts, at least, are not every part of academic publishing needs blockchain. You can argue that the other way, that everything, except for the experiments, needs blockchain. I was just wondering if there's any things that you think you can highlight as, this is where we benefit more, this is how we can move further, faster, and this we don't have a problem with, and the current system actually works. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Who's going to go on it?
I have some thoughts. I had a few examples in my talk, but I do think that everywhere where we have a problem now, we could look at a blockchain solution. For example, when Joris mentioned a few of the current trust issues, reproducibility. You know, you could think of having a reproducibility register secured in a blockchain. That I would find something very logical. I mentioned peer review. I think that would be a possibility. What I was wondering, because you hear a lot of people say it would be good to use blockchains for data sets. I find that a bit more difficult to imagine, but since you are in that space, maybe I can bounce the question back to you. How could you see Figshare migrate to a blockchain infrastructure?
So the idea there is that you have distributed storage on many computers around the world powered by the blockchain, so it always takes you to the right stuff, and so you're not able to say, well, if I'm doing some Nobel Prize research at Cambridge and then I upload it to a system like Figshare, it's not on some dude's computer and they're like, oh, Nobel Prize winning research, I'm just going to publish this and, you know, interpret it somehow. It's locked away, but it is distributed around the world. We were just chatting beforehand as well, and I think it's very interesting here, the idea that, so you don't think academia is broken. That was probably related to a conversation we were just having. I wouldn't say academia is broken in the sense that we still advance, we still get drugs, we still get research coming out that moves us forward, and we could possibly move forward further, faster. I would say academic publishing is broken to an extent that, look where we are and I don't have access to a lot of papers. The thing I would flag about that is, you know, choosing your battles. And I think the idea about reproducible research, that's why I was trying to kind of nudge people into a priority order. I think blockchain is fantastic for reproducible research, you know, seeing the log of how things have come about. I think the idea that we're going to change the business model of academic publishing because of blockchain, I think that's a bigger battle given the legacy and, you know, we call it playing the game. You know, you've got to play with what's already in there and try and move things gradually. There are people who would argue, let's disrupt the whole thing, let's, you know, break it down. And we might have a few in the audience. I can see someone trying to put up a hand to either shout me down or agree.
I had a quick question, because like you were saying, a lot of, in terms of publishing, there's also a lot of regulatory businesses and things linked to the government that also limit publication and data, freedom of information. Would blockchain affect that, or could they still use blockchain and limit the amount of available data for doctors and researchers?
Healthcare data, stuff that not everything as open as possible, as closed as necessary, I think is the line they use in academia. I think you mentioned something on this, Soenke, with regards to privacy?
Yeah, I mean, these things, they are like second things, right? They have something to do with cryptography and then blockchain on top, right? It's a cryptography realm. This is not directly blockchain. Also blockchain secured multi-party computation, blah, blah, blah. But this is not, but this is certainly a very interesting field, and I think it will be covered together with blockchain topic in the future, because blockchain became a much broader term now. Yeah.
And just something that, again, personal experience, we are a portfolio company of digital science, and yet we work with people in the humanities, and we get, it's a tough sell sometimes, you know, to have that conversation. You're a scientist by training, and you have blockchain for science. Yeah. Again, in terms of priority, do you think it's for all of academia? Yeah, you know, or is it blockchain for research, or is it blockchain for science?
Yeah, it's actually blockchain for research and humanities. In Germany, we don't have this distinction.
Oh, okay.
It's Wissenschaft, so it is knowledge creation. It's one word. So I'm like kind of abusing this arbitration in Germany for marketing purposes.
And does anyone else have a thought on, we heard about peer review. I think the idea of incentivizing people to do things is something that anybody who is in academia would struggle with. Value, payment, this kind of stuff, is that something that we think peer review and reward is something that's an easy target?
Yeah, I believe that the value of doing research online is not captured really well, and blockchain could really store all these various components, peer reviewing, talking about your report. You could capture that and store that as your reputation. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think, I mean, before we talk about payments, we should talk about how people are rewarded in the academic industry, and that's not by money. It's never been by money. It's by reputation. So what we have to do is translate activities in that reputation computation and collecting more data sets through blockchain is the first step, I think, to build a more comprehensive metrics based on that. So let's first try to make it visible, make it recognizable. I think that's the first important step.
Yeah, a line I like to say at the moment in academia is everybody wants to be famous, not Kardashian famous. We all know academics who don't want to be seen, you know, in public, but it's in order to advance your career, people need to know about it. You need to, if you want to win the Nobel Prize, someone's got to heard of your research, right? So that reputation, I think, is very powerful. So,
about peer review, I guess I have a couple questions. I guess it does seem like an interesting possible application of blockchain, but one question I have is, how do you get around the need for a trusted third-party certification of the credentials of the peer reviewer, or is that not a problem? Is that okay? And payments, I mean, we could do payments now. We don't need blockchain to do payments, but we don't pay peer reviewers for, I think, the reasons that you said, that it's not about money necessarily. So,
I think I'm just going to hijack every thread because I've got the microphone. But I think one thing that I find really interesting about, I've thought about this, and I thought maybe we could give out tokens based on your H index. So, you know, for those who know about it, so I have a H index of 3, so I'm getting 3 tokens for a review, but probably Soenke has a H index of a few hundred. Yeah.
No, and the other part is like, it's a very interesting thing. It's the identity problem, right? It's like the experiment. You can't prove identity to the blockchain world. You would need to have a trusted third party to prove your identity. It's unsolved, right?
or maybe like education certs that feed into the peer review blockchain.
Exactly. There could be universities that could like provide a key that you are actually there, that you are a person and you are not 10 persons, or like a publisher who has proven identities, right? Like this would be an application, or ORCID.
Yeah.
But as soon as you put like economic pressure on an identity, you would distribute money. There's no protection to have like 10 ORCID IDs at the moment, right? So this is another thing, you know. It's always about trust and pressure to generate identities.
Well, not to put anyone on the spot, but is anyone in the audience here working or involved with a publisher that pays for peer review? What a coincidence. Hello. I was wondering just with regards to that question about paying for peer review, and some big publishers say it's not the natural incentive, what your experiences have been there?
You know, I just came back from a conference in Portugal, and they were all researchers, and my COO is a businesswoman. And so, you know, we saw about Eveline Klumpers, and I'm the founder and CEO of Science Matters, that publishes on the single observations and not stories. And so these are observation blocks, so we put this blockchain publishing observations. And so we said we pay reviewers, and the entire research community was completely split right in the middle. The one said we shouldn't pay researchers because it comes with the data to review papers. And so when you ask questions in a seminar, or you give input on a talk, for example, this is similar to reviewing. And on the other side, I sided with the other community, the other part that said, if somebody does a job, you need to pay. And so anyway, so the researchers think that, half of them, they seem to think that they don't need to get paid. And Pablons, for example, Thiago Barros, he's a part of Pablons, he was there talking about kind of a tokenomics, that there is this badges and some kind of tokens. And we think, so we are now going, Science Matters will be on blockchain in some time, and we probably will go into 2 steps. One is that paying peer reviewers will not be with this PayPal or whatever, but it will be on tokenomics, there's token-based. And the second thing is, of course, on using observations as blocks, and then as a result, you can build your narrative on blockchain basis.
And I know, Eveline, we were talking before about this idea that using smart contracts to control who has done what, and the idea that if somebody, so in the journalist sense, if somebody's done somebody's written the content, or somebody's taken the photographs, you can split up royalties in that, or rewards in that way using smart contracts. And so that would apply pretty well to, you know, this person wrote the paper, this person did all the research, this person did all the computation at the end. You could apply that pretty directly, right?
Yeah. And then, for instance, when coming back to science, this person has done a peer review here, this person has done that, and then you allocate all these different components into one reputation token, maybe. But it's also very important that you could lose credibility as well, because if there's not a payment, when there's not a downside to it, you control the system, right? So you first have to see the system, and once it's there, once it's out there, then it will come to a certain cost to, for instance, do a peer review, because if you do it not correctly, then you also lose your credibility. So we really need to think that through.
As long as credibility is not money there, that's
Yeah, and I wonder how.
Peer review, you lose money.
I just keep on wondering, because we're here talking about tokens, and I'm wondering how would we be incentivized for tokens? What is a token, and what's a token, and why would I run extra hard for a token, right?
Bitcoin's launching in the morning.
Yeah, a Bitcoin token. Yeah, is it already 10,000?
I think we have a question over there.
Isabella Myers. I was wondering if we take this even further and look at being able to make payments to participants within scientific research. I think this would benefit particularly those in the developing world who don't have bank accounts, who we need to undertake research with, and therefore incentivize them to maybe take up an intervention or be part of research. And that could be a continual payment for the rest of their life, and actually make quite a big difference.
Again, just to hijack every thread. So I have an opinion on this, which is microphone. It's being recorded, so everybody who's speaking, if you can wave for the microphone, it makes the recording a lot better. I think there's two elements here. So there's a company called Science Exchange, which says, there's a lot of machines in labs that aren't being used 100% of the time. So could funding be better spent if you just said, instead of getting a lab and giving them $10 million and saying, buy a new MRI machine and buy a new, all these new £500,000 things, can we just say, okay, I'm going to use Duke's fMRI screen machine, and I'm going to use this from over here, and we're going to do research that way. And my concern I think that's a great idea on the top level, so I think what you're saying applies really well to there. My concern about the developing world is if they don't have the machinery already, then what services are they providing? Is it intellect, or is it to be test group?
The people taking part in the research, so like your cohorts, actual people. So it's taking it further away from the actual academics. It's talking about those who are providing the data.
Right. Okay. Which again, I'd be concerned about ethically if you're giving money or tokens for people doing things that might be like blood. No? You do. I don't think you do it in the UK. Oh, you do it in the UK, yeah. Okay, cool. Any more comments on that one, or?
I think the idea of having some crypto economy around science is a very interesting one. People get tokens for example, a review, and they can use that token to buy content, for example. So we can have tokens for a variety of scientific activities and allow people to trade those. I think that's a very interesting.
I want to add to this crypto economy in science, because I think that's very beautiful. Today, if you have an idea, we take grant money from somewhere else, and there are these ridiculously high ACOs happening with a lot of lawyering fees, and they become a marketing exercise, maybe, potentially. So why don't if you have an idea, publish it and have a little ICO, maybe. Even Vitalik Buterin from Ethereum said, there should be continuous coin offerings that grow with the project. So why don't you have an idea, test it in the lab, collect 3,000 euro, if it works 30,000, and then collect more. This would be a very nice way of I know you're into peer review and you're a publisher, but this can be extended to science, but it's microfunding.
So, Mike, just again to be the protagonist in this conversation, would you not be motivated to always, if you were, I've got my £3,000 or my £30,000 to get this experiment started in my lab and pay my mortgage. And then, oh, we're up for, if it's good results, this gets lifted up, you know, positive results, it's 300,000, 3 million. If it's bad results, I can't pay my mortgage.
Very good, very good.
Good protagonist.
No, that's a very important point because negative results are also valuable scientific results. And there's actually a guy working on this project. It's called, I think it's DEIB. He pools the money to incentivize negative results as well. He's working on smart contracts on this. And it is a very interesting discussion to lead this discussion.
Okay, so out to Carver.
A lot of interesting ideas coming to my head, but something I've been thinking about is anonymity in publication, in research. There's a lot of talk about gender bias, generally of high-level researchers against younger people. And I feel that what I'd like to see is a research field, if you like, or a system where everyone does research. I think somebody mentioned it, that you could be a researcher, have done a lot of work, but still be anonymous and get brownie points for it and get recognized for it. I'd actually would like to go further. You know, there's a lot of people say, well, in universities there's gender bias. There's actually there's evidence that even women unknowingly are biased against women. So I'd like to see a job being advertised and someone applying for it and being up to the interview, no one knowing if it's a 14-year-old black kid or if it's a boring white guy. And basically that takes out bias. Sorry, I went on a bit, but I'm sure Mark wants to hijack this. But
let's ask a boring white guy. Sorry, I'm not a boring white guy.
Laurie, do you want to respond to that, or is it a supplemental?
You know, that's a very...
It's recorded now, Carl. I'm going to hold it against you. I'm going to put it on the blockchain.
You know, there was a recent PNAS paper that showed that there is a clear bias if it is single versus double-blind peer review. That this is one of the best controlled papers. This is a very small computational scientist group that took the same paper and then sent it to reviews with single-blind and double-blind, and there's a clear bias if it is single-blind. And scientists were eager to review if it is from a well-known institute, and the acceptance rate was much higher if the person was famous and had a clear track record. And so in Science Matters, already 2.5 years ago, we decided that we will have triple-blind review. Since it's just single observations, it was easy for us to anonymize papers and then send it out where even the handling editor and the reviewers and the authors, they are all blinded to each other. And we don't know the data yet, so in a couple of years we will do meta-analysis to see whether we truly democratize, in a way, if I could loosely use the term, democratize science publishing. With single observation, a person from Kenya does he or she has the same opportunity to publish in a scholarly peer-reviewed publication. And I completely agree with you. There is this bias, but we still need data. This is the PNAS paper that just got published 2 weeks ago. For me, this is one of the best scholarly articles to show that single blind as it exists today is not very good.
Any further questions?
Well, I think it's a very relevant point you made. I don't think necessarily this is something blockchain can solve. Of course, within science there's already, single blind, double blind already exists. So I'm not sure. Maybe other people think otherwise. I don't think this is something that blockchain can solve.
Technology is more now pseudo-anonymous. So it's like a Swiss bank account if it's code, but if you backtrack that to a person, you can see all the various steps. So I think it should be outside of the blockchain and then brought back into the blockchain. But I'm not technical, but that's what I understand.
So blockchain can't help with that without anonymity.
Yeah, there's like this, it's often mentioned your control of your identity. It's public-private key cryptography, like you sign emails, you have your cryptographic identity, nobody conclude from this key to your person, but if you can prove him your private key, you can see that it's you. And this, it has to do, it's like related to blockchain, it's used in Bitcoin, for example, the account management of Bitcoin, but it's not blockchain in the deepest sense. But it's like often comes along with blockchain, yeah.
Yeah, and double blind is already possible, of course.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just rigorously implement that all journals. But we don't need blockchain to have double blind review.
But I was thinking a bigger system where you know, for example, something like Stack Exchange, for example, where you can go on Stack Exchange. There are people who are famous because they know everything, but their name is ID 5162. You don't know who they are, but you know it's that same person. Yeah. So,
And so I think this is exactly what we wanted to get out of this event, you know, is the more people think about this, the more questions you have. People come up with great ideas and then people debate them and see which ones are the actually really good ones. We've got 10 minutes or so, I think. And we do have some more questions. So if you do want to get your questions in, get them in the next few minutes.
Hi, Mark. Eefke, you mentioned that you need to have the solution ready, and we don't, and we need a crisis. And so Bitcoin had the solution, Satoshi, and we had the 2008 financial crisis. So you alluded to that you didn't see that the crises in science being that great. I think my common observation is there is huge crisis, but you have to lift your view up. So the two that's on my mind is climate change, and it'd be a positive because the world will need our help, and they're skeptical of us. And the other thing would be the bankrupting of every health system on the planet, which we're on par to do. So I think there will be an event, but it won't come from the two places or internal. It will come at a higher economic, social, and I was just wondering if the panel had a view of what that black swan might be.
That's interesting. I heard you say climate change and the bankruptcy of a health system. Yeah, so we need an outside event, outside science that suddenly shakes us up and puts us in place to force real solutions. I think that is very true, absolutely. But I'm not sure where the connection with blockchain is. Would blockchain then help us?
Yeah, it's like a reverse banking crisis. So science, we would argue, has the answers to climate change. We're not using them. The evidence becomes evidence that we have to use them, and which evidence you can rely on, and the science would be the ones we'll rely on. So we need to have adoption, and by that time we have the system in place, which is built from scratch from you, Mark.
Blockchain systems, president of the US couldn't force us to delete the climate data.
I think one interesting question is, and that's what you said, is how big is the crisis in science? I think that's an important question we have to ask. How big are the problems around peer review, and how urgent are they? I think there's no consensus. To what extent they really need an urgent change.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go to that question. Sorry.
So this might be a really stupid question because I don't understand enough about how blockchains work, but it seems like, let's say in the currency case, you already have dozens of competing blockchains trying to solve the same problem. How do you avoid something like that happening in science, and how do you avoid it becoming something like, oh, there's a really successful blockchain that lots of the community signs onto, and then there's the Elsevier blockchain that is different than every other blockchain?
Elsevier would definitely do their own blockchain.
We don't prevent this from happening, right? We have already the most beautiful and most secure science blockchain up and running, and this is a Bitcoin blockchain where we can store results in, right? They all have pros and cons in terms of scalability, in the integrated scripting things, what you can expect from the blockchain to do natively, what you need to like build on top of these things. So I think there will be a lot of different blockchain solutions that will be employed in science and research. Because, I mean, today, how many databases are there in science? If you count Excel, every Excel sheet of all the scientists and all the databases the journals are running on, these are like, I don't know how many, yeah? So this will happen. But they can like be integrated, so you can like use the immutability, and people even claim that Bitcoin might survive an all-out nuclear war, yeah? Because it's so distributed and like mining. So you can use the immutability of Bitcoin to like store very important results that a lot of people would attack. But for smaller things that need more scalability, you use your peer review database or a long association of publishers and something. Yeah?
I think it's very healthy to have a lot of things in parallel. That is also one of sort of the ground ideas behind a blockchain. And it's very analogous to way scholarly communication now also works. You know, we have between 12,000 and 20,000 peer-reviewed scientific journals in the world, and researchers publish in many different ones. Peer reviewers work for many different ones, and it probably keeps the system very healthy. So I don't even see a big problem with that.
Yours slide, the vision of the integrated data layer, that's a beautiful vision, but how does that happen?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that. I mean, that's one of the, I think, the potential is to have that one database. And I think it's also the question, what is the route towards that one database? You can have 20 or 100 or thousands of initiatives, but eventually I think that's the ground vision, that you have that single database. I think that's when the blockchain really starts to have its advantages.
But will it be on blockchain though? The whole database that you envisaging? I mean, which blockchain right now can you imagine that will go for that level of data?
Yeah, that's an unknown. It's true.
But does it need to be on blockchain? For example, if I'm going to Gamechanger and I'm looking for some genomes there or genetic sequences, it's not really a question for me that those databases are not trusted. I'm not expecting some sequences to be deleted. So you have come up with this statement, but how much is it true?
I mean,
why do we need this data layer?
No, that's a very good question.
On the blockchain?
Yeah, I think, and that's actually also covered in the report. Do we really need a blockchain for that? And it's a very fundamental question. And I think so. The goal. Yeah, no, exactly. So one of the advantages, again, there are many advantages, many ideas. One of them is to have that single database, the single database that stores all information. The question is, how can you? Is there any middleman? Is there any authority you want to trust on that? Managing that database, and I think there's none. I mean, it's not a commercial player. There's no institution that's willing to do that. So
I tried to jump back.
Yeah, but
I go to jump back and I
it's true.
my sequence to it.
No, it's true.
I trust it.
Yeah.
I don't suddenly go back and start thinking, questioning, or is that sequence has been manipulated by someone sitting and
It's true.
managing the jump.
Yeah. Why not? Given the world we live in today, why not?
Yeah, but is there an actual example of that happening? I mean, why
Trump
not?
deleted the whole of the EPA.
Pretty,
Trump deleted all of the Environmental Protection Agency data, so why wouldn't he just delete GenBank or play with it in some way? That's the whole point of blockchain, right? It's trustless.
There was one.
You have to trust me.
There was an article this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we spoke to the folks at IPFS to try and avoid trusting me.
It was this weekend in Reuters was an article that a report from the World Health Organization had false data. It was manipulated. I mean, even those agencies are so
they just need distributed storage.
Again, one of the holy grail is to have one single database. And the question is how, again, the challenge is to find a middleman that manages that. And that's very difficult. And blockchain technology can be a way where you can achieve that single database. It's not the goal, it's the means.
We have less than 10 minutes now. I think we have 4 questions. We'll try and get through them. I think it'd be good to end on where we're going next from this conversation. But let's get through the questions and see if we get there.
One quick question, it's kind of following on from that. What blockchains really do is they allow a lot of innovation around governance. and how sort of entire industries are run. One of the main reasons around is the ability to fork. So if you don't like how an industry is running, you can basically just copy the code and start a new one. How do you think that might impact your industry? So this isn't my industry, I'm from the music industry. I was working in a similar sort of area, so I'm just interested in how you think that might work.
Yeah, it's a good question. The idea of forking and the idea of if you don't like it, moving on. I kind of like that idea. If everything's out there and you don't like a certain way it's done, you can iteratively improve on it. There is always going to be people who have differing opinions. I think people have differing opinions in this row. So anyone got any thoughts on forking, pro, con? Only a good thing, only a bad thing?
I mean, the question came around governance and whether new ways that the industry might be run might spring up. Sort of the mechanism for like forking, but actually it's how actually things are run.
Yeah, and we've got... And we have things like, I know, Eefke, you're involved with the Research Data Alliance, again, talking from the industry I'm in, and that tries to be democratic. Would you say it is truly? Would you say it could be improved on in any way?
Yeah, I think this comes down to the question, who or what do we trust in the end? You know, I found it very, I think you just touched the core when you said, well, on fiction, you have to trust me. And I heard somebody from IBM telling lately in one of his talks, and they work on artificial intelligence, they've done all kinds of tests, and apparently people trust machines and technology more than other people. And I would have assumed that it would be the other way around, you know, because if I want trust, I also want somebody to be accountable, and I want to be able to look somebody in the eye and sort of, you know, blame them if something goes wrong. I'm not blaming you for anything. But so if you say, how do we want this industry to be governed differently, then that is really the sort of the existential question. Who do we trust more? Do we trust distributed databases better than a few big players, or do we trust smaller startups more than mighty tech companies like Google or Amazon or Facebook? So in the end, it's a trust issue, and that is also the most intriguing aspect of blockchain, because it claims to build a network of trust without a central authority. But that is also the magic of blockchain that I can't really get my brain around yet. So that is also exactly what I tried to explain. Yeah, we have to wait and see how that really works and who can really prove that works. So this is not a real answer, but I think it does touch upon where it gets really complicated.
I think it's a great one to take down the pub and get into the profound stuff. Okay, so we've got Thea and then Chris, and maybe if we've got time we'll get all the way around. So
Theo Bloom from BMJ, and this is it's clearly getting towards the end of the evening. Here's another unanswerable for you. In the last 20 or 30 years, is there anything that scientific communication has adopted that hasn't already been very widely adopted elsewhere? Which is a way of saying, do we need to wait for newspapers, books, music, everyone else to sort out how blockchain works, and then scientific communication will adopt it? Because we're kind of a bit conservative and
history repeats itself, probably, but...
And if not, how do we get out?
Actually, I'd say the opposite, Theo. I think if there was one industry to adopt internet really early and to make a really successful transformation, also business-wise, to a digital environment, it was STM Publishing.
Took what was print and put it online behind a paywall rather than inventing something new.
Or what kind of new thing would you want it to have?
Well, I just feel like this is where I'm struggling, because it seems to me we're talking about such a leap, and I haven't seen scientific publishing. And this comes from someone who's been working in open access for 20-something years. We don't seem to be very good at making leaps. So there's something about how do we do that? How do we that where I think mainly what we do is see something work elsewhere and then adopt it.
Well, maybe we didn't make the leap because we didn't have the technology to do it. This might be it.
And so, a couple last questions. I don't know if there's any more thoughts down there. So, there was one here and one here, yep.
Isabella Myers again. The importance of verification of data, talked about all evening. But I was just wondering that because this is sort of fundamental to blockchain, how this can actually help with machine learning and AI and that sort of development in the world of research and medicine. And I see that as being really important. I wonder what the panel's view is on this.
Yeah, we've got the Turing Institute just across the road here that's focused on exactly that. So how do we help that? James, how do we help that?
So we have centralized machine learning today. Google are pivoting to a thing called federated, where the trading's done on your phone. I think for science we need decentralized machine learning, which is this super smart contract that owns the AI, and we all own the AI. We'll be talking about that at the weekend.
Look. And one last question, still relevant in there?
Hi, so I guess I was going to follow on from what the gentleman was talking about the Genome Project and about forking as well. Do we not really still have to trust somebody though? Because doesn't someone hold the keys to that GitHub account that runs your blockchain, and can't they access that and edit it as they want to anyway? And I guess the second part of my question is around censorship. So we're talking about Donald Trump taking things off, taking environmental papers down. Is the world really ready for kind of a completely censor-free environment? I mean, YouTube, for example, censors their content very, very carefully. Well, not very carefully, not carefully enough, some argue, but a lot more than others. So wouldn't you be heading for a kind of a super libertarian future if you started putting things like scientific papers on the blockchain and things like that?
Yeah.
Do you think it's ready?
I mean, just my 2 cents. We were talking before about, for those who don't know, there's a site called Sci-Hub, which is often sued, often taken down. It's like Napster for scientific academic papers. If you just put that on distributed storage and made it available as a DApp, how would you take that down? You know, so which is illegal, and you can argue about the pros and cons. But what's everyone's thoughts on libertarian future and the pros and cons? Again, that sounds like a big question for the pub.
I mean, the technology is already out to put something immutable and permanent on the internet, but it never reaches the masses at the moment. So if you have a picture somewhere on IPFS incentivized on Swarm, or there are some other things that have like a distributed cloud internet that's not on somebody else's computer, but very deeply encrypted on distributed computers, it's already out and you can't delete these things, but it never reaches the masses like YouTube.
Yeah, I think there's people who can talk to that more than I can. I mean, Ethereum's forked. Bitcoin, is it decentralized? You know, these are big newsworthy stories. Is there really anything as such thing as trustless in this world?
No, but I understand, like, your idea of it will never be unbreakable. And I like it. If you talk to a 25-year-old at a computer con, they say, like, this hash is unbreakable. Get older, and you see that there's black swans coming up, right? And this will be in blockchain world always. But I mean, Bitcoin, there are billions. It works for 7 years. So it most likely it will work in the next year, too. So it's like, it will never be completely trustless. And we need to trust the creators of the smart contract. But in theory, a lot of people can review it. But as we see, even by the Ethereum developer team, a smart contract of a multi-sig wallet broke. You know, you would never, people trusted millions on it and it broke. Yeah? So this is like completely right to be concerned about it. But it will take time and then we like trust it more.
Don't give me the mic. Yeah. Okay, I think we're about ready to wrap up.
One last thing. So I want to announce, and I'm really grateful with James and Roman, we have this hackathon next weekend, and maybe we even create sponsored by Digital Science, and maybe we create a Digital Science token and send it around, right? I mean, if you feel like it, you're most welcome to join, you know, and thank you for Digital Science for sponsoring.
Thank you very much. And just before we finish, in terms of like, just so I know, because I'm interested, this is not for anything, it's not being recorded. A show of hands, who is here is primarily in the academic sector? Okay, who here is primarily in the tech sector? Who here identifies as other? Okay, so good mix. So you know who your friends are to talk to afterwards and speak to some of the other folks. So thank you once again for our panel and thank you for everyone else today. I don't think there's any leaving notes, right? We're just going to disperse. Perfect.